Let's draw a rose. I feel romantic. So we use this photo just as a reference. We don't have to copy it every single detail because it's not a portrait. That's the advantage in drawing natural stuff. There is lots of variety. So we see it as a loose reference. The important is to understand the structure of this rose, of any rose. It has an internal part that is much like a champagne flute, and then the external petals that open up in a more widespread way. So we have these two parts that we have to outline. You see these petals, we outline them briefly. Again, they don't have to be exactly equal to that of the picture. You see, they have angles because they tend to fold in many ways, and so we have to render this angling of the tissue of the rose. And then we go a little bit in the internal part, that this petal that open up, it's around the calyx, it's around the flute, let's call it like that. You know, the important thing is to render the tridimensional structure. Then if we do that, we are good. So we have to render this, and to understand that each petal tends to they fold and they bend towards the external side, and we have to render this bending of the petals. And then we have these externals, you see, these external ones. You see, we just have to understand how this rose is made, this kind of simple characteristic of a rose, and we can render it in a way that our eyes and our brain, as soon as it sees these forms, it says, okay, it's a rose. See, knowing this and tracing this kind of, we can call them not figure, they are kind of abstract forms. Every petal you see is just a form. It's an abstract form. We see them, we render them, and our brain, our mind goes back and forth between the tridimensional structure, between the understanding of how a rose is made and these abstract forms. And then we go on the inside. You see, the petals tend to be more tight, and they form this kind of spiral in the inside that we have to render. So this is just two parts, the internal calyx and the externals, wide open petals. We render them and we have a rose. We just have to give to the brain, to the mind of the observer, these two structures, these two kind of forms. You see, it folds on the inside, the petal, this internal petal folds, it bends, they go up and then they bend externally, and you can see them to the light. The light strikes the part that bends towards the light, and we trace it as we were tracing a glass. You know, a glass has a part, a lateral part, and then an ellipse. That is the opening. We render it in this way, and we go here. The advantage is that we don't have to be exactly precise. As in a portrait, you have to render the exact form of the eye, for example, and you have to put them in exactly the right place, because if not, it's something deformed, it's something that is not human, as we can see. When we draw a rose, a flower, or a tree, or something vegetal and more natural, we don't have to be so anatomically precise. We can be more loose, we can draw much more freely, as long as we render the sense, the meaning of that form. You see, I make it a little more similar to the photograph, but you see, I don't spend so much time to be precise, to be exact, because there's no need to be so precise. It's not a portrait, so we have to render a rose. You see, we know the forms, we understand how a rose is made, and your eyes start to see a rose in these abstract forms. These abstract forms fuse together, forming the picture of a rose. Here we go. I'm drawing the internal petals. There are. Here we go. It's enough. Let's draw, just outline this part, but we are interested in the flower. Now we concentrate, we focus just on the flower. And then, with the sanguigna, in Italian we call it the sanguigna, which is iron, which is made of, like graphite is made of carbon, the sanguigna is mostly iron. And we start to color it. I want to do a romantic pale rose. I feel delicate today, so we will use this delicate sanguigna, which has a not so dark color. We will. The picture is a white rose, but we wanna make it pink. So you see, we want to draw the bending of the petal. He is opening outwards towards the sun, of course. And you see, we have to render this curved surface that open up. So our marks, our lines, our chiaroscuro is made to outline this delicate, subtle form. And also, you see, I make my marks a little visible. I don't want to hide them completely, because they help me to render the texture of the rose skin, as you say. If you see a rose, it has some line, it has a texture. And so, making my lines more visible, I render this texture. And so, when I draw, I think, where does this form goes? How tridimensionally is this form? Each one is a different form. Each petal is treated as a separate, abstract, tridimensional form. It's a kind of sheet of paper that folds, that bend and folds, and I outline it. The lights come in front of the rose, and so we have the petals that open up, which are stricken by light, and the latter part, which is little hidden shadow. Now I have to render this tridimensional flute shape, and then I go to the other petals. You see, it's kind of straightforward. It's not so difficult. If you know the form, if you know the structure, you just have outlined a good, convincing outline of a rose, And then you just treat every petal separately and you render their form and how the light strikes them one by one. It's kind of repetitive, and you see I don't hide my marks. They give substance and texture to the rose skin, to the tissue of the petals. Here we go. It folds, so it has a darker part in the inside and then in the outside, because it bends backward, and we render this curved surface. Mark them a little bit. I tend to mark, it's a delicate drawing with delicate colors, so we have to make some precise line, because if not it will be kind of dull. We have to give it some strength, so some dark, some sharp line is needed to give it a little more personality, a little more character. And then we darken it. This is in the shadow, you see, so it's darker, and we render his curved surface. And the other petal, here we go, and the other ones. You see, it's one by one. I loosely watch my subject, my model, my reference, and I outline it. It's kind of more relaxing to draw this than a portrait, because I repeat, I don't have to be really precise. I have to render this form in a loose and relaxed way. Here we go. They fold here, this petal here, and then I go here. I like to go back and forth from the internal part to the external part, just to make it a little more, to add a little variety in my exercise, in the way I do it, so I don't get bored substantially. And then this internal part is darker, because the petals are tighter and they block more light. So there's this dark part, this kind of spiral pattern that I have to render, and some sharp line. You see, it's the difficult part is rendering the delicacy, the I don't know, the romantic and soft aspect of this kind of drawing, but giving it a little strength, not to make it too dull, too delicate. It's a subtle equilibrium. Then we go here to this one. You see, just one by one rendering. I've outlined a good enough form, and now I just give it form with my chiaroscuro. One of the technique I really love is mixing sanguigna with graphite, with pencil. It was about the first technique I used, and it gives a little more dark and sad, I would say, aspect, which is not so in line with this drawing, but I suggest you try. You just draw the sanguigna part, and then you mark the darker part with graphite. It's a good technique. It gives a more rusty color to your drawing. But now this is intended to be more a very delicate and romantic drawing. So this is enough. This one, you see it open up. I go here. One by one we draw these folds, this open up, this bend externally. So the internal part takes a little less light and then goes in full light. It opens up and take full light. Just add a little color and we go to the other. Here we go. Here we go. We are heading to the end of our drawing. As you see, it's been pretty easy. It's a straightforward procedure. As long as you understand how a rose is made, as long as you understand how the petals fold, it's a straightforward and an easy path. Here we go. Just darken a little bit the darks. Let's add a little contrast. Always put some contrast in your drawing, unless it becomes really too dull. You have to give it a little strength. Let's add some contrast. I always proceed in layers. I add all the drawing. I give one layer to all the drawing and then I come back and darken the darks. Never finish one part before the other, because if not, it tends to be less equilibrated. It tends to seem different drawing put together. Then this going inside, you see, add some. This is the darker this pencil can go. The darkest, it cannot go darker. And then darken here and here. In the inside, it must be darker. Here we go. Here we go, here and here. You see, adding contrast, it gives it a little more strength and also a little more color. Here. Now I'm adding a little texture. Here and here. Here we go. A little texture. And this petal here is kind of too white. Let's make it a little more colorful. And here, see, I add layers. I don't go on the full length of dark in just one pass. And then I put a little shadow, a little form shadow on the internal side of this fold, because it is not an angle, it folds progressively to the outside, and we are finished.